Today is Monday, October 6th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. President Trump issues a dire warning to Hamas. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and leave a rating. It really helps us, and we'd appreciate that. And we'd love to hear from you. Our email address, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Shoot us an email, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through all the news of the day, CBN's Billy Hallowell. And on the focus story, Billy, we have Salvation Army Major Phil Swyers seeing firsthand the devastation caused in Texas by the horrific floods this past July. We've got some updates.
Yeah, we're going to get into really what's been happening since it's sort of fallen out of the headlines. So we'll have that update today.
All right, looking forward to the details there coming up in just a minute. On the main thing, a surge in violent crime. What is causing it? Madison Seals has more on today's main thing. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. As always, they're right there in the description of this podcast episode. We have the links in there, making it handy for you to go ahead and follow those as well. And join our faithwire.substack.com. We're praying through the news of the day there together. All right, with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And President Trump has warned Hamas to move fast or face massive bloodshed. Just minutes before a key peace deal deadline expired last night, President Donald Trump issued an urgent message on Truth Social aimed directly at Hamas. He said there had been very positive discussions over the weekend with Hamas and several Arab and Muslim nations, all working toward releasing hostages and ending the war in Gaza. Trump described the talks as very successful, saying that teams would be meeting today in Egypt to finalize the deal, but he did warn that time is of the essence and that massive bloodshed will follow if Hamas doesn't act quickly. He closed by saying, "We've had very good meetings and it looks like it's working. Now we'll have to see how it all turns out." And a federal judge blocked Trump's plan to send National Guard troops into Portland, ruling the move unconstitutional and a violation of the 10th Amendment. The U.S. District Judge there issued an emergency order stopping the deployment of troops from California and other states, accusing the DOJ of trying to sidestep her previous ruling. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And it seems President Trump is kind of on the verge here, but still issuing a warning of a potential deal here. And, it's been positive developments with, Hamas really kind of at this phase now where they've had many of their leaders killed and they're getting absolutely decimated. And what other options do they have at this point? And who knows how many of these hostages are even alive at this point, the ones that are left. And so it seems like Trump has done a good job putting the pressure on. But like he said, we'll see how it all turns out.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is you can't fix stupid and evil unless stupid and evil want to fix themselves. And I think that you have Hamas here, an institution, a terrorist group that has not been trustworthy and obviously cannot be trustworthy. And yet you're trying to solve a problem. And so this is all, really, they've done every single thing they can do. President Trump has done every single thing he can do. And I think these threats of bloodshed are really showing the extent to which the U.S. is willing to continue fighting this battle, to bring it to an end. I mean, we are here literally at the 2-year mark, right? It's just unbelievable. This is still going on. So I am hopeful that, they have been forced into a position where they can no longer continue their maniacal, evil, disgusting behavior. But we have to wait and see, because again, the history is that they're a little difficult to pin down and they don't really listen.
And October 7th is tomorrow. And it'll be very interesting to see how people respond around the country, particularly here, with that anniversary. Like you said, 2 years. It's very hard to fathom that hostages have been in captivity, in terror tunnels, or wherever else they're being shuffled around to for 2 years. It's really inexcusable. And it's a wonder that anyone even remotely or just through insinuations sides with Hamas. It's absolutely ridiculous, but sadly, that is where a lot of protesters and people, particularly college students who have been indoctrinated at some of these universities, where they stand on it, unfortunately. So we need to be praying for that for sure. That hopefully that situation finally resolves here. 2 years in, wow, just incredible. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And as we mentioned at the top there, Salvation Army Major Phil Swyers, he was firsthand witness there to those floods over the summer in Texas. And he's got an update now. So what's the story here?
Yeah, I think it's important with these stories that we show up to tell them after the media has moved away. I think a lot of times these stories are huge and it's horrifying and everybody is just captivated and following, and then you don't hear about it again. And so while the media has moved on, the people of Central Texas, they have been forced to continue picking up the pieces of really has been the unthinkable. You had more than 115 people dead, property destroyed, and of course, a lot of people left traumatized. And so Swyers, who has served decades with the Salvation Army, he told us that the area is still in a state of recovery. Our community suffered so many lost lives. He said people are grieving the deaths that have taken place, but also the homes that have been damaged, some of them all the way down to the foundations. And so right now you're dealing with a situation where a lot of people need help with cash. They need help with basic needs, right? And that's why it's important we still talk about this, because those needs don't go away just because the headlines have stopped.
What has the Salvation Army been doing to serve the community since then?
It's interesting. So right now they're dealing with cash assistance, and they've kind of moved from emergency needs to immediate needs, right? So when you're in a state of emergency, you're doing things like showing up to give people temporary housing, bringing them food and all of that. Now they're moving into sort of how do we help people with the needs that they have? And then soon they'll move into long-term plans for assistance. So there's different phases to it. But he said that people can't really comprehend the needs that are on the ground, especially, again, with the media attention pulling away. He said at first the Salvation Army showed up to comfort people, to provide the food, the drinks, right, the resources. But the big thing was giving spiritual and pastoral care as well. He said we had pastors on the ground, and folks, even before the disasters take place, are trained in how to comfort people and share the love of Jesus with individuals, especially in tragedies like this. And he said assuring people that God loves them, right, despite what is going on. And so there's a lot of trauma as well, obviously helping people navigate through that. So they're doing a lot on the ground, both physically meeting needs and spiritually.
Yeah, and speaking of that trauma, after the water sort of receded back and they were dealing with everything going on, what has been the emotional toll there?
Yeah, the big thing, obviously the biggest story that came out of this, you had over 115 people dead, but you had the 27 children and counselors who were killed at Camp Mystic. That was the Christian summer camp. We covered that a lot here at CBN. And the nation really struggling with a lot of that. But what he told us was that when the waters had receded, there was a lot of emotional scars. People are still trying to just get through the day. It's only been a couple of months, right? So they're trying to navigate what they've seen, what they've experienced. And he said, we're just trying to help them share the love of Jesus, to let them know and remind them that with Jesus, there's hope for tomorrow, no matter what has happened. And so people, when you imagine the children, the counselors that have died, they're really, again, trying to struggle and deal with how to grapple with just the most unthinkable situation that you can imagine. And the Salvation Army is going to look ahead again to long-term plans, restructuring, helping people, I'm sure, rebuild. And he said, we know not only mentally, but in our heart that even in this devastation, God can be found. He said there were stories that would just take your breath away of how God did show up even in the middle of so much tragedy. So it's, we've got to be praying for the people there of Central Texas and not forgetting them, because it's so easy when the press steps away and the media steps away to just sort of think, oh, well, this situation is remedied, but a lot of people are hurting and it's not remedied.
And that's the nature of the media, unfortunately, is it's a demanding beast that just needs content to constantly be consumed. And so what happens is a lot of these stories, even though there's still major things happening with them, they get shuffled to the back of the newspaper, so to speak. I mean, obviously not newspapers anymore, but it's on the back page now of the internet, and you just don't see it that much. and there's just a fire hose of information, and it's just crazy, and it's constantly being fed and fed and fed, and they're just looking for the newest thing, the next newest thing. And so, yeah, it's very difficult to, keep in touch with everything, the needs that are going on, because people move on. Sadly, there's just the next crisis and the next thing. And those are important things too. So it's not to demean the fact that there's more news coming, but it's just the nature of how it works. I mean, you look at the people in North Carolina after the hurricane there and the flooding that happened there, people forgot and they moved on. And so that's why places like Operation Blessing are so important, because they continue. And the Salvation Army, they continue working in these places long after the headlines disappear. That's just sorely, sorely needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that prayer, again, to your point as well, for everybody doing the work at Operation Blessing, at Salvation Army, and for the people on the ground who are struggling after the loss of a child. I mean, the most horrific thing you could imagine, that we're just continuing to add this. So if you've got a prayer list, add those people there in Central Texas, because they really need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at places like Operation Blessing, the Salvation Army, you can donate there and be assured that they are going to be helping people in the long haul. They are not just there for the week after and the immediate aftermath. They're there for the long haul, helping people and sharing the gospel along the way. So important stuff. Definitely, like you said, praying is the first line of defense there. But if you want to physically help, definitely check out ob.org and places like Salvation Army. It's great stuff. All right, Billy, appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to head over to the main thing now. And a surge in violent crimes across America has taken over a lot of the news. Like we talked about, the news cycles move on. This is one of them that's happening. Well, legal and crime expert from the Heritage Foundation, Cully Stimson, talked to Madison Seals about what policies are allowing for these crimes to continue to happen. That conversation is today's main thing.
These past few weeks especially have been heavy, and that almost feels like putting it lightly, with news flooding in almost daily, it seems like, of the stabbing in Charlotte, school shootings, Charlie Kirk's assassination, the ICE shooting in Dallas. It seems like an increase in extremely violent crime here in the U.S. So, Cully, since this is your area of expertise, I'd like to hear your reaction to all of this and what you think is behind it all.
I think two things we should keep in the back of our mind are major contributors to this sort of angst and reality that we're seeing on the grounds in various cities. One is more of an historical piece, and that is the last big crime tsunami we had in our country peaked around 1992, 1993, and crime rates have been going down substantially since then. We've gone down like a roller coaster, and incarceration rates have gone down across the country. And why did that happen? That happened because states took an increasing carrot and stick approach to driving down crime rates. The carrot side was alternatives to incarceration, domestic violence courts, drug courts, thousands of alternatives to incarceration. And the stick was increasingly harsh penalties, especially for recidivist criminals. And that drove crime rates down across the country. Remember, the states do 90% of the crimes in terms of prosecuting and holding people accountable. The feds only handle about 10%. That all changed, Madison, in 2016 when George Soros started funding and buying DAs around the country. The first one he bought was Kim Foxx in Chicago at the end of 2016, 2017. And since then, with the household names that we all know about are George Gascon in L.A., and Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, and Kim Gardner in St. Louis, and Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, and Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, Alvin Bragg in New York, etc. And there's 274 of them, more or less, out of the 2,300 elected DAs around the country, but that's 70% of the U.S. population. And so well before the pandemic hit, crime rates in those cities, which had been at historic lows, spiked dramatically. You add that to the fact that Trump has now been reelected for a second time. And he not only won the popular vote, he won the electoral college vote, he won all the swing states, and he won in large part because he promised to close the Biden-Harris open border and deport illegal aliens. And so when you're getting rid of DEI, when you're pushing back on wokeness, when you're encouraging free speech like Charlie did so well on college campuses, the radical left is infuriated. And so you're seeing them act out in all sorts of ways. And so when you combine the two, Madison, the Soros rogue prosecutors who water down felonies to misdemeanors, don't prosecute misdemeanors, don't send violent juveniles to adult court, don't charge anybody with crime that has adverse immigration consequences, never ask for cash bail, you get a psychotic criminal like the North Carolina stabber murderer. You have a radical kid from a good family who should have known better, who just went off the deep end and allegedly murdered Charlie Kirk. You have all of these other nut jobs who are, fighting out against Trump, but in proxy ways. You have these pro-illegal immigration radical lefties attacking ICE agents. And so at the end of the day, I would say we can now draw a very bright line. On one side of the line are the people like you and me, and I'm sure many of your listeners, if not most of them, who support law enforcement, federal, state, local, county, you name it. And then the people on the other side who pick and choose, if they choose any, to support on the law enforcement side. And then, again, you have people who are for illegal immigration, or you have the people who are against illegal immigration and for legal immigration. And so you're seeing this clash, this coincidence, this collision of visions of what America should be about and how we should carry out the mandate that the people spoke very loudly about last November. And that's, I think, explains a lot of why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one point that you've talked and written about is that public safety is a right here in the U.S. It's not just a privilege. And the president's response to violence in these big cities has been to send in the National Guard, which has come with its own pushback and legal troubles. But whether people like the sound of it or not, is that what's needed? And do you think that that's helping?
Well, it certainly is helping here in D.C. And remember, the D.C. National Guard report directly to the president. He's their commander-in-chief, whereas the state National Guards report to their governor, who is their commander-in-chief. But the way I sort of look at it, and I've sort of changed my way of thinking because I think we've been playing into the hands of the left, is if the blue city mayors and governors were doing their job and enforcing their laws in their cities, and they actually supported all law enforcement, none of the actions that the president is taking would be necessary. They would have fully funded, fully resourced police departments. They would trust and believe in and support all law enforcement, including federal law enforcement, and they would cooperate willingly in the enforcement of federal immigration law. But they're not. And so I think the limited actions the president's taking are not only lawful, but unfortunately necessary because of what the blue city mayors and the blue state governors are doing.
So you've mentioned the jobs of governors and DAs, or at least what they should be in protecting their citizens. Can you kind of just summarize what kind of solutions or policies need to take place to push back against the rising crime? And that could be anywhere from the governors to police forces.
Well, even though they claim they didn't do this in the past, they did defund the police in various jurisdictions. Remember, there's 18,000 police departments. There's over 3,000 elected sheriffs. There's 2,300 elected DAs spread across 3,143 counties. So we don't have a criminal justice system in our country. We have systems all across the country. And so a lot of these city councils or county councils defunded the police or took large chunks of money away from police departments. And so I think we got to start with the basics. Respect for law enforcement, period. And that starts with fully funding police departments and then building up the trust and speaking well about law enforcement who are doing their jobs well. Are there bad apples in law enforcement? Yeah, there are bad apples in the press too. There's bad apples everywhere, but it's an infinitesimal percentage of any of the workforces across the country. So you have to get recruiting and retention back up to 100%. Here in D.C., they have an authorized police force of just under 4,000. They're 800 officers down because the officers don't think it's worth it. Because the D.C. City Council has been a bunch of radical lefties. They've defunded the police, and those officers want to go home every night to their families. And so they leave D.C. and they go to the surrounding counties where they're safer and they have more support. So that's number one. Number two, We learned the hard way, Madison, during COVID, that who you vote for your school board directly impacts the quality or lack of quality education your kids are getting. That's the same for your local DA. Most people couldn't even name their local DA, but she and she alone, the district attorney, decides who gets prosecuted and who doesn't. So if you have a Soros rogue prosecutor, they hold the keys to public safety in your community. If they're going to fully enforce the law, all of them, evenly, impartially, but aggressively, then you got a good DA. There's good Democrat DAs, there's good Republican DAs, there's all sorts of good DAs out there. But if you're a Soros bought and paid for rogue prosecutor, then you're going to water down felonies to misdemeanors and not even prosecute. You're going to order your DAs not to prosecute any misdemeanors at all. You're not going to allow any sentence enhancements. You're never going to ask for cash bail. You're never going to send a violent juvenile, even a 16 or 17-year-old gangbanger who murders people, to adult court. And the list goes on. And so pay attention to who's running for DA in your county. And then third, I thought Black Lives Mattered. I was told that. I remember hearing that a lot. I think all lives matter, including Black lives. But guess who is disproportionately harmed when you don't enforce criminal law in the inner cities? Blacks. Blacks are disproportionately, especially Black males, are disproportionately the victims of homicide by other Black males. And the toughest neighborhoods in the town, in the inner cities, are the ones disproportionately impacted by violent crime. And every single one of those families and those mothers and kids, they deserve safe streets, safe neighborhoods. But when you pursue these Soros radical rogue policies, they're the ones that are impacted the worst. And that's the really sad reality of this sick, failed social experiment.
All right, Madison, appreciate that report there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
Yes, we have got Psalm 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And it's just a simple verse, but it reminds us of what we were just talking about, that we got to be praying for people in need, people who have gone through horrific things, and that God is there to heal the broken hearts.
Yeah, and oftentimes one of the kind of blessings we get in a tough situation like these is that we get to be that conduit. We get to be the conduit of a blessing and to help others be lifted up in Christ. And he does it through his followers and through his saints and the prayers and the help and the meeting of the needs of other people in need. So, great verse to leave it on today. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. We will be back here tomorrow with more. Till then, have a great rest of your day. God bless.